Welcome, everybody. This is the 37th episode of the Social Business Hangout, and with me today is
John Bradford.
And I'm Robert Levine, your social business mentor. And today we're going to be talking about downtown Brantford. Not downtown Bradford, downtown Brantford. And over the course of the day, as I was prepping for this one, it's like, I'm going to so mess this up. So I'm getting it out of the way in case I do. But more importantly, the concept of a BIA, or a business improvement area, because the downtown Brantford, in this context, is the name associated to the BIA.
That's right. And really, what we're talking about is what you call, in your buzz technology or terminology, is hyper-local marketing.
Exactly.
And I will define that according to downtown Brantford.
Fair enough. So let's go right into that. When I hear the term BIA, and most people have no clue what BIA is.
In fact, I don't even use it, to be honest, Robert. I avoid the phrase. Every time I talk about it, I talk about downtown Brantford. We don't care about the corporate entity. I mean, we care as members of the BIA, but the general public doesn't care. So I refer to it as downtown Brantford.
So when someone originally came up with the name, obviously in this particular case, it's focusing on the downtown core, but not all BIAs are necessarily a downtown area. It is an area that's defined, for lack of a better term, business improvement.
Yeah, it falls under an act in the province of Ontario, and for business improvement purposes, the majority of them are downtown areas, because generally the downtowns have suffered over the last 3, 4, 5 decades because people have moved into suburbia and into malls and the big box stores, and the businesses which were ma and pa and niche businesses in the smaller areas were in the downtown. So it has an emphasis on a downtown, but it's not exclusive to downtown.
Mm-hmm. And you brought up the example, obviously, as you say, people started their businesses in the core, and for either reasons of economics, meaning it maybe costs more to run that same business in the suburb, or there's more people buying in the suburbs because they don't want to commute into the downtown core, or like in Toronto, like the world's biggest bookstore no longer can sustain itself because the taxes of being in the downtown core are considerably higher. So we're not necessarily talking about making it more cost efficient for a business to sustain, but driving traffic to sustain the business, for lack of a better statement.
Yeah, driving traffic is one element that the BIA is involved with, and all BIAs are. But the other is advocacy. That's also representing the interests of all the businesses in a specific location to those people who have the capacity to make decisions that will affect them, which generally are municipal governments, as an example, or provincial or federal. If there's an opportunity to make change and someone can offer that change, you need to have a bigger voice. Mm-hmm. So we represent the bigger voice than the one-off of the single store owner.
So would a lobbyist be an appropriate term for that, or? Yeah,
not in my vernacular, because I'm not a lobbyist. The lobbyist is the board. There is a board of management who governs and determines the agenda and strategic planning for the downtown area, and they are the lobbyists. My job, I'm just a consultant. I'm not an employee. I'm a consultant, the purpose of which is for marketing and communication to improve the lot of the businesses that are in the downtown.
Okay, so let's focus on that specifically. One of the things we talked about earlier is a lot of people don't even know they're part of a BIA, because the taxes that are paid that fund the BIA are by the property holders, which are not necessarily the people running the businesses, right? So part of your presence is to make people aware of who you are and what you bring to the table.
And that's part of my role as communications. Because you're right, if you take a look at the act that determines what is a BIA and how does it function, it gets its revenue from the specific location designated within a municipality as the downtown BIA, or as the uptown BIA, or in Toronto the waterfront BIA, whatever it is. Once they've identified the actual boundaries logistically of that, then all the owners of the businesses in that area, who are private owners, they pay a surplus. They pay an additional cost on top of their taxes, and they may not even see it unless they examine their taxes more stringently than they would if they lived in the North End or in some other location. But those that know that they're in it, they also know they get special privileges. There are special dispensation for parking, special dispensation for building code. There's special dispensation that allows the businesses to operate on a different level than, say, the big box stores. But then again, they may be paying $4 a square foot downtown compared to $100 a square foot at a mall. So they see the advantages in a number of different ways.
So when you were talking about that, the first thing that came to mind was, immediately I think, I'm paying more in taxes, but there are, as you say, perks that come with that. Because going back to that lobbying part, not you specifically, because that's not your role, but if it's a scenario where parking, we need more people parking downtown, and they'll lobby for that. If you're not within that territorial area that is there with the BIA, you're on your own.
And a good example of that is I owned a piece of property on Icon Drive. I owned Dive Bell, a scuba diving company, and it was on the south side of Icon, the same side as the casino. Well, the BIA only goes to the north side of Icon Drive, and so I was never part of the BIA, which meant I was not part of the communication of things that were happening in the downtown. So things would happen, and they would just come out of the blue, and I'd have to respond to them in an ad hoc fashion. And they decided that they were going to completely repair Icon Drive and put in a median down the center of Icon Drive. Great, super idea, but that median blocked access to my building, my business. And so when I found out, fortunately I found out before they had actually constructed it, because someone advised me, and I went to City Hall and they fixed it.
But had you not necessarily been as active of a person, or just...
If I hadn't been astute, I would have lost access to my building from people traveling west. And that would have been, that's 50% of my business when I was in that location. Because people were traveling through town from that direction, both ways.
So going back to what we were saying earlier about awareness, when someone's looking at running a business or starting a business, and they're not even aware that these things exist, it will decide whether or not they choose to operate in a particular core. Because to your point, you're either going in it as a loan, and it's kind of like a union, for lack of a better statement. It's
it has a collective.
That's what I'm saying. You have a collective that is working on behalf of the collective for the purposes of bettering the collective.
Sure.
And so when you look at running a business, you can
except nobody's paid. That's where it differs. Because nobody's paid to do that. They're all volunteers.
So even the board is all volunteers as well.
The board is all. There is one staff person,
and that's typically for administrative and stuff like that. Okay. So when you look at, and once again, we were saying the hyper local is the element, because in this very element, the hyper local is the boundaries that are the BIA.
Yeah.
When you look at that hyper-local aspect, there's the communication side, which is, as you say, making people aware, finding out what their needs are and stuff like that, and really the only way to do that is to talk to people. So maybe walk me through that a bit. When you look at something like, and I've used this analogy before, we're talking about downtown Bradford right now, but this could be any core anywhere in the world.
I'd like to come back to the phrase hyper-local, because it sounds like it's a tremendous buzzword, and it's used by marketers currently as, I can help you with hyper-local marketing. And really, hyper-local marketing goes back far before there was any legitimate form of media. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's fair. I typically have water out ahead of time, so we forgot about that. I apologize.
But hyper-local marketing is talking over your back fence to your neighbor. Hyper-local marketing. I had an opportunity in my communications career to work in Cambodia for a couple of months, and I saw hyper-local marketing at its best. And that was in the jungle in Cambodia. You'd see a series of farm workers traveling along a clay path, and they would meet a series of workers traveling the opposite direction along the same clay path. And the ones coming from the west would tell the people what there was behind them, and the ones coming from the east would tell what was ahead of them. And the net result was they shared the local situation to each other as they passed on the path.
Mm-hmm. And probably did commerce in the process as well, because I'm sure
to an extent they had no money, they had no product. Basically, they would go out, they would sustain. That's a whole other podcast.
But
the concept is not different now. We've looked at mass media, and I have a background in mass media, and we look at mass media as a method of getting to the public. But you ask anybody, what is the most effective form of marketing, and it's one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can get a relationship, as you and I are talking right now, there's a relationship developing in our discussion That's hyper-local marketing. Now, how do you do that? Because you can't talk to everybody you want to talk to. That's where mass marketing come in. The social media has added another element that allows you to do what I call the Lady Clairol marketing. And the Lady Clairol marketing is, I tell two people, they tell two people, they tell two people, and so on, and so on.
And now it's 2,000 will tell 2,000 will tell
Exactly.
2,000.
And that's really what I'm doing from a hyper-local perspective in this community. What my job is to communicate directly with the businesses and on behalf of the board to identify what strategies are effective and what people's opinions are about strategies, and through that communication process, then find a way to express the entire message to a larger group of people. A lot of what goes on in downtown Brantford is actually mythology. A lot of people have an attitude or opinion based on their experience that occurred 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago, and their mind is set on that. And everybody that's been down there, they walk around with their eyes up and they look at the changes and they say, I can't believe this is downtown. My job is to get that message out, the I can't believe message. And I am using hyper-local marketing or the Lady Clairol approach to be able to do that. If I can get enough people to tell other people, once you come down, you'll tell other people. That's what it's all about.
And I've always used the analogy of the farmer's market, where in the old days people would be on their farms and they wouldn't see their neighbors or whatnot, but they would meet at the farmer's market and not only exchange stories, but exchange their wares or whatnot.
Absolutely.
And you actually have, in the boundaries, I believe, the farmer's market is in the BIA in that particular
Although
case.
they are not a fee-paying member. So they are one of the attributes of the downtown. So is the casino, so is the library, so are the social services, so are the universities. They're not fee-paying elements of it, but they're part of the attributes. So when I say I'm here for downtown Brantford, I'm here to support downtown Brantford as a destination. Because there are a lot of things in downtown Brantford that are not just commercial. But from a commercial perspective, there's the old feet on the street. The more people that are downtown, the more they're going to see the other businesses, and it helps them as well.
Well, and I think going back to that first thing we were talking about, it is as people move into the suburbs, and you see this, in a lot of the large cities, and even here, they come maybe downtown to work, and then they're gone, and they never come back. So, the evening entertainment, the evening activities, all of those things that whether or not it's as tourism or Parks and Rec or whoever puts on, gets people a reason to come to the core or wherever you want. Like, really, when you think of the BIA, that's a business. You want people to come into your front door. So when you think of that entire region, it could be just one big hyper mall, for lack of a better term.
From a certain perspective, it's a microcosm. I would agree with that. And in fact, it's an unexplained microcosm. If you ask anybody what is the downtown, they'll have an opinion based on whatever their experience, whether it be good or bad. But if you ask them to say what is it the downtown offers, there'll be a great deal of hesitation because they don't know that. For example, there are 23 businesses in downtown Brantford that are dedicated towards food and beverage. 23, in an equivalent to a 4 square block area. How many people knew that? You can get a set of fries poutine 100 different ways for under $10 that'll feed a family of 12. 24 hours a day in downtown Brantford. People don't know that. You can get a variety of foods, of drinks, of opportunities downtown. I was asking someone recently who is running an event in downtown. It's going to be a running event, so there's going to be sort of road closures as they're.
I'm actually going to be emceeing it.
Are you emceeing that one? That's Bill Joel's thing?
I MC those for.
Yeah. It's originating at Harmony Square and moving out through the community and coming back again.
And that's the one for Nipissing, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And of course, that's why it's downtown, is because we have a university presence as one of the attributes of downtown. But when I asked him, I said, how do we get people? We have 64 kilometers of trails in Brantford, and they culminate from all directions at Brant's Crossing, which is with Lone Bridge. That's where they all come together. How do we get the people who enjoy those 64 kilometers to walk 100 meters to the downtown? And so that's my job. My job is to convince the businesses, that there's a marketplace running by your door.
Well, it's funny you bring that one up, because when Bill approached me a while back because they're the awards ceremonies, right? So I basically said, well, I'm going to start running in these events. So if I'm going to be there, I might as well MC for you, right? But my immediate reaction is I only want to do the trail runs because I'm a trail runner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not a big fan of running on asphalt. I'm an old man, not as old as you, but I'm an old man, so the knees and the ankles and whatnot.
But
then,
for those of you listening, his eyebrows went up when he made that comment.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not sure he is younger than I am.
But
this is audio. We don't have video.
Yeah, well, there's the picture. But the idea there was, then I really started thinking about it. It's like,
I have more hair.
yeah, you do have more hair, and it's frustrating to me as well. I'm going to go for the Jean-Luc Picard look soon, I think. But when I really started thinking, it was when he was saying that it was to promote the Nipissing University, and that's what really drew me into it. So it was something greater than just the fact that I'm not running on the trails. So it goes back to what you're saying. His event drew me in to doing a run that I would not normally do.
And there'll be 200 people with you. And of those 200 people, when I spoke to Bill, a good percentage are from out of Brantford, and this will be an introduction to Brantford to them. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But people running from downtown, out of town, and back again aren't buying stereos and TVs.
No, they're not.
And in fact, if we close the roads, that becomes an issue for the businesses, because the guy that sells the radios and the TVs, if a client's coming down to compare his prices to the Future Shop, if he can't get into town to see his prices, he's going to buy at Future Shop. So that closure may have cost business for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the businesses have to look and say, it's great to have activities and events that draw people into the downtown. That's a certain form of advertising.
Well,
But it's not necessarily the only form, and it shouldn't be as frequent as it is.
Well, one of the ones that really got my attention a while back was the Telephone City Car Show.
Right.
And when we were walking around, and I was walking around with Ron, who's been on the podcast a few times, saying, I've seen cars on some roads that I've never seen before, meaning it was clearly growing. But to your point, the entire core was inundated, like all the parking was gone. You couldn't get in. You could not do business.
You could not bring up.
So that's a prime example of what you're saying,
Yeah.
where an event is.
But then my job is to take the business who maybe feel concerned about that and try and engage them in the project. So there was a restaurant down there that had, in previous car show year, they had just moved to the downtown. They had tried to open their business with all those cars there, with the roads closed. And this year there was 7,500 people. So you would think last year there were maybe 5,000 people. What happened? They ended up costing them $50 on the closure day, because they paid more for staff than they got in revenue. This year they put one sign out in front of their building, said $4.95 breakfast all day long, and I couldn't talk to them because the lineup was so big going in and out of this place.
Well, the one
they have to engage themselves.
The one that I liked was there's that vintage, what is it, Netty Vintage or something like that. It's like a vintage
They're
clothing.
actually not in the BIA.
Okay, but they used the opportunity to do a photo shoot.
Yes.
So that type of imaginative, because you...
And you know what I liked about that? It was a business that's part of the expanding BIA that we're hoping to develop, which will take us from the BSAR right up to the rail station. They would become part of the BIA. I was glad to see that they wanted to be part of downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that. And I thought, this is great. Now, and Moose Winooski's
Yep.
is sending their darn moose downtown because they realize we're getting the attention they're not.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying. If you're having an event, whether or not it's a baseball tournament or whatever, when you got people sitting and you're having the opportunity to advertise to the people that are sitting there. So if you've got a congregation of people walking the streets, even if your business is not in that area, that is advertising space. It's like whether or not it's a highway where people are driving by billboards or they're walking past cars. The one thing that I also thought about when you look at that is, using that one example, I did not know about that photo shoot until a week after the event. And that goes back to what we were talking earlier about traditional versus non-traditional media. Mm-hmm. The traditional media would be, I'd be there and there's your business and I'd have the sign and you'd have your one-to-one commerce on that day. Mm-hmm. And I might not even come back because, I've left. But here's a scenario where someone put the photo shoot on social media. It got shared on social media, and the buzz of that event continued well past.
Absolutely.
And it was a blended
Yeah.
campaign, because not only was it advertising the cars, but it was advertising the clothing line as well as the photographer.
And in fact, the owner of that business is very clever in her marketing skills and her strategic planning. And so I have actually encouraged her to be part of the marketing committee, which is independent from the board for the downtown.
Oh yeah,
project. And so we're bringing those ideas in.
And I would agree. Like, she blogs, she's got she is a social business in every sense of the word.
Absolutely.
She has a very niche market. She blogs about it. She talks about her stories. She's going to be writing, her stories in the Advocate. And the list goes on and on. So it is by far, trust me, I had not even heard about that business until the car show.
That's right.
And I'm just following it now because I love everything that she does.
That's right.
And she's already starting to get recognition with the Brand News Reader's Choice Award. She's nominated for a few things as well. So that model...
She knows how to work it. She knows how to work it, and that's important.
And that's the type of stuff you want to blend in, because when I walk the downtown core, and we are within blocks of that area.
You're in the downtown right now.
Yeah.
You're in the BIA area.
Oh,
right
so
now.
this
the museum is in the designated area.
Okay, so when I interact with a lot of people in there, I don't see that same level of social business that I see in her. So having that blood come in, because I think going back to what your role is, both in terms of communication and marketing, because as you say, you come from a traditional media, traditional
the
communication.
most traditional, mass.
But you're far from traditional now, and like I said, you and I met online before we ever met face to face. And I think the first tweet you and I actually had, you misunderstood something I was saying about. I think I was talking about Pipa and Sopa down in the States, and you were wondering it, and you came off almost confrontational.
Well, I was confrontational because I'm very much opposed to people who abuse copyright, but I'm also opposed to people who try to edict copyright. In terms of SOPA was the bad guy.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that, and when your comment came out, it appeared to me incorrectly. We solved it.
Well, and that goes back to the idea, and this is media in general, every conversation, whether or not it's on social media or traditional media or on the phone or face-to-face, is an opportunity to dialogue and either influence a person's understanding, influence a person's belief, influence a person's decision to sale. Because, if you're looking at, you brought up the Future Shop versus a stereo place, stereo, you're not buying a stereo in the downtown because of price. Because quite often you're not going to compete on price with a Walmart or a Future Shop or a Home Depot or whatnot. They just got the volume that you compete on story, you compete on customer service, you compete on experience. If you were what's the electronics store downtown, Brand Stereo? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If I was doing their marketing, I would be doing a podcast on a weekly basis where you're basically just talking about hi-fi and stereophiles and all that stuff.
The
right?
different individuals who are downtown for whatever their particular reason is, whether it be an entrepreneurial or startup or an incubator environment for whatever it is they're doing, or it works from them from a financial standpoint, whatever it is that the reasons are being down there, they are learning about different tools. And that's one of the things I'm bringing. I'm showing them with some very simplistic tools, I'm showing them that you can maximize the exposure to a larger demographic. I'm showing them how they can interpret analytics, how they can see the numbers and the specifics of the demographics who are attending currently downtown environment for whatever the reasons are down there. And I'm giving them a reason to become interested in the use of social media as one aspect. And one example of that is Facebook. And I knew that Facebook had a potential, but I'd never used Facebook. As you know, my background is more mass media. But I did a Facebook page of photographs with comments. And it was just silliness comments, fun stuff, and it was all positive oriented because I'm trying to alter the perception of downtown. So I want to show all positive.
You're changing the narrative.
I'm changing the conversation, absolutely. And in doing so, and doing it through Facebook, I was doing it because Facebook is a good tool to use for photographs. It was a convenience. But when I did it, and then the first time I got the analytics, the response back, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe how much Facebook knows about us. And it's insidious. On the other hand, the data that arrived on my desk allowed me to see things about the nature of the people and who was coming and where they're coming from and what their interests and gender and all the rest. And I was knocked out by that. And it gave me an opportunity to rethink how I was going to do the next set. So I started out with, there was one photograph that was there, and 40 people were interested within an hour. Well, an hour and a half, or 400. And then it was this Lady Clairol moment was happening. And all of a sudden, I'm up to 5,000 people in a week looking at my pictures, and I was up at that point to something like 18,000 friends of friends who were examining what their friends were doing. I'm thinking, that's a lot of eyes on a photograph, and that's really interesting. So I thought I would go out and purposely try and exaggerate that. And I did so. There was an event that I attended, and then through my photographic opportunity, because I was doing roof photography, they called me the aerial paparazzi. And I captured this event from an aerial perspective, and it went nuts. And now I'm up to 40,000 friends of friends, and I'm up to close to 7,500 people a week who are watching what's happening. So I've seen that you can influence the demographic, and you can do so by understanding who the demographic is. That's just simply understanding the analytics that Facebook's done. So I share that with the companies I've got. So I've got companies who have never done things before who are now experimenting with these things. That's my role.
Well, and you brought up, and this came up in the conversation we had with Sean Allen when he started getting into, because he was using, Brand News was being used as a profile page, and then they moved it to a fan page, so he started getting the analytics. And for the first week, he was in analytics heaven, right? But the very adage of, he would take pictures from the sporting event, and by the time he had his copy written for the article, the pictures were already tagged, and he knew who the people were, and he didn't have to call the coaches. And not just that, but the I hate using the word, but the virality of the picture grew. And what I mean by virality there is reaching an audience that is larger than your first degree. That's all it really is.
And that virality is a new experience for me. I understand the audiences from my broadcasting background. I understand audiences. I understand the drive and determination that are used by advertisers and how they focus and create a center of attention. I've spent 40 years doing that. But I'm learning there's a different virility, as you call it, that is beyond the expected. It's unexpected. There's one photograph that I took on day one. So I've only been doing this for, it's been 4.5 weeks now, I guess. There was one photograph that has maintained in the top 3 of virility every single week, and every day someone is sharing it with someone else. And I couldn't understand it, but the words, I think, is what drew the attention. The picture is of 4 young people sitting on a cement wall down at Harmony Square. And when I was in Harmony Square at that event, I went up to them and I said, "Hi, folks, you having a good time?" It was a Music in the Square event that BIA actually co-sponsors on Friday night.
And you have a booth right there as well during those events as well. Yeah,
exactly. So we're there, we're supportive, and I was just curious, and I go out and engage the people that are there and find out what they're there and why, all those things. And that's part of my own personal research. And in fact, I went up to these 4 people. They're just 4 young people, and they just looked happy. I said, "You having a good time?" And their answer was, "You know what? We just love Brantford. We wouldn't live anywhere else in the world." I said, "I'm taking your picture." And I took their picture, and the 4 of them have this delightful innocence on their face, and it says their words, "We can't think of any place else in the world to live." And it's gone nuts, that picture. People started to say, "Wow, the young are engaged, and they're engaged in a positive fashion." That message is just as important as the alligator's face that was there for one of the fundraisers. It's absolutely incredible what draws the attention.
Well, they had the Elvis in the Square a while back, and I had my picture taken with the faux Elvis, and it was the same thing. I did Elvis sighting in Brantford, and tons of people, and it's like, it's an Elvis impersonator,
and
yet it got
the only thing
talking.
I ask next time, Robert, you're out there, when you type it, just add one word: downtown.
There you go.
So whenever you're saying anything about Brantford that occurs in downtown, just say downtown.
No, I'll take it one step further. Instead of going and writing the word downtown Brantford, I'm going to go at downtown Brantford, so it's linked to your page.
Super.
And that's the model. So once again, when we think about how we do hyper-local social media, a lot of it comes down to how we tag things, whether or not we're tagging pictures, whether or not we're tagging emotions. Even something like that picture that you're talking about, that in itself has become a primary piece of real estate that is drawing people no different than a billboard. Using that as an opportunity to advertise events, it's a billboard. Why wouldn't you use that as what your high traffic points are?
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people forget when they look at their social media, is tracking what is the stuff that's being hit upon.
What is it that people want?
Yeah.
There's the old adage in business, you can't go away from it. Identify the need and fill it. Well, if the need is to see a positive attitude and location, we'll give it to them. That's what we're there for. And that comes down to an interesting thing, because social media has this mystique about it, and it really isn't mystical.
No, it's just amplified is all it is.
Well, and it comes down to two words that you and I have used, or I've used it with you in the past. It comes down to cargo and rails. And I live by that philosophy. You can demystify anything that's in communication if you can identify from a railway metaphor. Is it the cargo or the content, or is it the rails, the distribution? And if you get rid of the distribution side, you can emphasize content. So I spend my time on content. That's what is promoting, that's what's marketing the downtown Brantford area. On the other hand, I'm using the rails for that distribution.
Well,
and I'll use different rails according to the...
Well, and that's where I use the repurpose. Yeah. Just because you've got something that works on one set of rails doesn't mean that you're able to then clone, because it's digital, that same element on another rail and let it have a different life there as well. But, when you look at, you were talking about the content, everybody that talks about inbound marketing, it's always content driven. Like these podcasts are a form of inbound marketing for my own brand as well as my own business or whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's the aggregation of all of that all of a sudden get to be repurposed as something else. We joke a bit about the bootleg that we have, which is like the first 25 podcasts. Well, how much more does it cost me to repurpose those 25 as something else?
That's right.
So when you look, going back to what I was saying earlier, not only are people, and this is kind of me looping back, not only are people not aware for the most part of what the BIA does for them, there is also that educational aspect of what's being a social business, what being a social media is, and all that type of stuff. And when I look at this podcast as an example, this is something that is repurposable by you to all of those people as well, because this is the conversation that you want to have over and over and over again to these people, but don't want to have
a conversation 300 times, but haven't got time.
Right, and that's where media has always been very helpful, right? It's the record once, use often, right? So let's use that. When you think of your target audience and these conversations that you want to have, and you're just one man, an old man, but you're an old, I joke. But the idea is, what would be some of those things that we haven't talked about that you would want to share with
I'm
those...
still thinking about the old man thing.
Yeah,
what do I want to share as a communication?
Oh, no, just like you walk into a new business person comes into the core, okay? What are those things that you'd want to share with them? And the idea being is you just make them listen to that last little bit.
You're looking at a welcome wagon approach, and that has an application. And from that welcome wagon approach, they have to know what it is that the Association of Downtown Brantford, you notice I'm avoiding BIA, the Association of Downtown Brantford, the corporate entity, has a role, and they have to, if they understand that role, they understand that they have an advocate. They understand that there is an opportunity for them to expand their business success by working with the Downtown Brantford Group. And so what we're there for is we're there to supply support system to them as well. We're not there to be their marketers. Because, in fact, as I said before, if you have 23 different food and beverage establishments, we're not going to promote one versus the other. We're promoting 23. And I'll give you an example. The Laurier University has new students coming in all the time in their September startup. And so I approached them, and in the past, businesses in Brantford have put various giveaways or swag or papers or sales or discounts into a great big envelope or kit bag that the students all get when they arrive. And students are what they are. They'll see what they keep and they'll toss the rest of the stuff. They may not pay attention. And in fact, there's been really negligible response to the businesses from that form of marketing. So what they did was, in my discussion with them, I discovered this year they're going to use a smart card. And that smart card will allow them access to discounts if they have the smart card, and they all get the smart cards given to them. But they will allow them access to businesses, to events, to different opportunities at discount along the way. So they can get into the Sanderson Center for $20 no matter what the show is. So that's a discount. So that'll be... The Sanderson's part of downtown, but they're not part of the Downtown Business Association. But they can get all these. The Sanderson could therefore spend $250 and be promoted on this smart card. Instead, and there are 300 businesses downtown. So instead of that, I went to the university and said, tell you what, make the downtown BIA your member. And we will, through linkages between our two websites, we will communicate the sale of the day, the event of the next week, the changes that go on, the things that will have an impact on students. We will communicate them, and through your card, they will access that communication, but we'll do it for everybody all at the same time.
And the nice thing with that is you can add things after the fact as well.
And you can change.
Yeah.
So if, for example, something comes up as a one-off and you want to make it better the next time, you can make it better the next day, and it doesn't impact the relationship that's been developed between the business and the student. So from that standpoint, they thought that was marvelous. They've never done that before. They do this up in Waterloo. They've never done that before. So now we are collective voice for all the events and changes and discounts that occur for students. And through the graciousness of the university, we did it for nothing.
And I think that kind of goes back to my point, is when you have a lot of businesses competing for what they need to focus on, which is making their own profit.
It's called market share. They want their piece of it.
Exactly. There is something to be said about the need for someone, and you use the word, and it's a favorite word of mine for obvious reason, the advocacy. You know, every community needs to have its advocates. But more importantly, all advocacy starts with people that want to have that positive, once again, changing the narrative, to use the analogy, right? So that, to me, at the end of the day, is what the BIA really is. It's the advocate for a better definition of what was there versus what could be there.
And that's very, very true, Robert. In fact, if you take
wiser than my oldest years.
There you go. So you're not as old as you look. So there are these.
For those of
there are
that,
issues. We're having fun here, folks.
Yeah.
We're just poking each other. For those who have a particular issue in the downtown core, they may have a different perspective on it. If they tried to be an advocate for that particular issue, they would be misrepresenting the downtown perspective. They would be representing their perspective. There's nothing wrong with them doing that, and they're certainly encouraged to do that on their own. But they shouldn't be pretending to represent the others. So as an example, road closures. Road closures are an opportunity for feet on the street, but they're also a closing of traffic which isn't going to come through town and therefore is not going to partake in the businesses if they have to drive around town, and there's an inconvenience caused. Brantford downtown has, in this next 3 months, 5 road closures. You couldn't close King George Road for 5 minutes without people screaming like mad. You never close between Linden Park Mall and Linden Road for 5 seconds. You couldn't put a barricade up there without people going ballistic. But there's a willingness to close things downtown. Well, that has its advantage, but it has its disadvantage as well. Some businesses appreciate only pedestrian or walk-in traffic. They love it. Some businesses appreciate the fact that people are coming there for services rather than goods, and they don't like it as much.
Is that, and once again, I'll kind of end on this, but feel free to add anything. When I think of any downtown, I always think of it in terms of walking. Whereas when I think of the suburbs, I think of driving.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with Brantford being a small town, I always walk as much as I can here, right? Especially when I'm walking to the downtown core. So to me, the road closures are less significant in the core than in the burbs.
But you're talking behavioral modification because, in fact, a lot of people live in the burbs, north, south, east, and west in Brantford, and they have to go through the downtown to be able to get to wherever they're going. Whether they shop in one location and live in another, they're going through the downtown. So they see vehicular access as more important than pedestrian access. I agree with you. Pedestrian access is good. If you have pedestrian access, you have a willingness to stop, take time, and appreciate what's going on. We'd like to encourage that. As an issue, the downtown would like to see two-way conversion. The majority of the businesses would like to see two-way streets. They're the only one-way streets in town. If one-way streets were good, the rest of the town would be one-way. But that's a third rail for politicians. They don't want to inconvenience the drivers. I think we have to spend a lot more time to convenience the pedestrians.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be honest. Some of the best fun I've always had is when you have like the Taste of Danforth in Toronto, where they just shut things down. The vibe that you get in those events trumps what the vibe is in that area when those events aren't there.
Yeah.
So, anything you want to add as we wind down?
No, basically, the principle behind my role within the downtown Brantford is to encourage people to come downtown. It's safer than other sections of town. It's cleaner than what you remember it to be. It's more open. It's more visual. It's more inviting. Please come downtown to Brantford.
And more importantly, if you're talking about Brantford, make sure you tag it as Downtown Brantford.
Downtown Brantford, please.
Okay.
And tag your name to it.
Yeah.
Tag your friends' names to it.
Make it viral. So reintroduce yourself.
John Bradford.
And I'm Robert Levine, your social business mentor. Thank you, John. This has been a long time coming.
Thank you, sir.